What's going on, guys? Today I wanted to bring you another one of my 2014 WCQ H.A.T format deck profiles. The deck I wanted to show off today is Counter Fairy Artifact Hands. It's a really cool, grindy, fun deck that I've really been enjoying playing, so I'm hoping you guys will enjoy it too. And it's also kind of off the wall and a little different from a lot of different decks, so it kind of makes it unique and even more fun. So without further ado, let's get into this deck profile. So starting off, the main monster that you want to see as early as possible is 3 copies of Bountiful Artemis. This is a light fairy monster that has the effect that each time a counter trap is activated, draw 1 card immediately after it resolves. So what's cool about this is, 1, this effect stacks. So what I mean by that is if you have like 2 Artemis on the field and activate 1 counter trap, then you get 2 draws off of it. The other thing is it does, well, first off, it doesn't activate technically for that effect. It's just an effect that occurs when a counter trap card activates. The other thing is you do get the effect even if the counter trap is activated, but it doesn't resolve. So, for example, if Wiretap gets wiretapped, you'll only get 1 draw, but I can't even really think of another case at the moment that would, but in theory, you know, I'll show off a card later on that it has the chance to resolve without effect. In that case, you would still get the draw because the card was activated and the activation wasn't negated. So very key card, again, just gets you lots of resources, and we all know how powerful counter traps are. After that, we play 3 copies of Artifact Moraltac and 1 copy of Beagletac. I wanted to keep the artifacts in this deck kind of minimal, and that's why I'm just playing 3 and 1. I'm not playing like 2 Beagletac or playing the Scythe, though I would recommend siding the Scythe, and if you really wanted to, siding a 2nd copy of Beagletac, if you really wanted to. Obviously, we all know the artifacts, but in case you don't, you're able to set them in your Spell and Trap card zone as Spell and Traps. And then on the opponent's turn, when they're destroyed, they'll special summon themselves back out and get effects based on which one they are. So for example, Moraltac, when it's special summoned on the opponent's turn, you're able to non-targeting pop a face-up card your opponent controls. And Beagletac, when it's special summoned on the opponent's turn, will pop up to 2 of your set spell or trap cards, or I guess just sets in general. So really key, if you have your other artifacts, you can pop them and then be able to make rank 5 plays back on your turn. So very, very strong. After that, we play 3 copies of Fire Hand and 3 copies of Ice Hand. Obviously, we don't have the most normal summons in this deck, and these are just great board breakers. Fire Hand being able to destroy opponent's monsters and then special summon Ice Hand, and Ice Hand being able to destroy your opponent's spell and traps and summon Fire Hand. So they're also floaters and just ways to keep monsters on board and have board presence. Obviously, those effects are also when they're destroyed by opponent's card, whether that's battle or card effect, and sent to the graveyard. So anyways, very good cards, very good to max out on those. And the last monster I choose to play is 1 copy of Honest, simply because you want a way to protect your Bountiful Artemis. Also, your artifacts are light monsters, so if you have 1 on board and your opponent's trying to swing over it, you can just drop Honest and you're going to win that fight. So very good card. Also, you know, having 1900 defense is a bit of a wall if you actually need it to be. For the spells, we play 3 copies of Pot of Duality. We want to be able to go through our deck and find the cards we need, especially because we play a lot of traps and stuff and a lot of diversity in traps. So very good card. It can conflict with the hands in theory, but at the same time, you know, most of your summoning is either going to be a normal summon or some special summoning artifacts on your opponent's turn. So really it doesn't conflict as much as you'd think. 3 copies of Artifact Ignition, obviously to destroy spell or traps and then set an artifact. 2 copies of Double Cyclone to pop either your dead artifacts that you hard drew into, or to pair with things like your Ignition, pop an opponent's card and then pop the artifact you set off the Ignition, and pop another opponent's spell or trap. So really good card there. After that, the last 2 spells, I play 1 copy of Soul Charge. Right now, this deck is 41 cards, I believe. There's a couple different things I would kind of want to change, but I feel the deck is so tight on space and I don't want to go too high in deck count, or I would potentially consider one more. But for the most part, the hands floating into one another and the fact that I am playing, another way to recur some monsters, I think one is a pretty good amount. And then lastly, one copy of Mind Control, just because we are playing 4s and 5s. And, there are most decks, I would say, are level 4 or 5 or play some 4s or 5s, so it's just a way to take their opponent's stuff and then make Xyz plays with it. Now, the biggest change I would say in this deck is maybe somewhere in the trap lineup. I'm still a little undecided and testing a few different things, so if a couple cards seem a little off, it might be for that reason, but overall very solid regardless, and that is 3 copies of Artifact Sanctum. Obviously, this one isn't one of the cards I'm referring to. Being able to just special summon an artifact monster from your deck is very good. You can only activate it once per turn, and you can't conduct your battle phase the turn you activate it. And then if it's destroyed by opponent's card effect, you're able to pop a card on the field. So extremely strong card. After that, we get into the counter traps, and I think this is more so what I was referring to as the counter traps. I'm still undecided because you want enough counter traps that when you do have Artemis, you get a lot of pluses out of it, but at the same time, you don't want a hard brick on them. So the counter traps I chose to play are 2 copies of Drastic Drop-Off. This one has the effect that you can activate only when your opponent adds a card or cards from their deck to their hand, including drawing a card or cards, and your opponent discards one of them. So this works really well because, one, you can do this on your opponent's draw phase. So in a top deck war, this just basically puts you ahead, sort of. In theory, it makes it even, but if you have an Artemis plus this, you'll get a draw and you got rid of their draw. It's also good against, say, spellbooks that would go like Blue Boy, add a spell, or Secrets, add a spell. You're able to just make them discard it. There's tons of other situations where something like this can come up because something like a Mermail, search a bottomless or something. You can just get rid of the bottomless. It's a really, really good card, but I think 2 was the perfect amount. You don't want to see it too much. After that, I play 2 copies of Debunk. We can play Debunk in the main, one, because I had just made a video talking about how good Debunk is and how a lot of players are starting to play this in the main, but this hits like almost everything in the format. You can hit opponents' hands with this. You can hit your opponent's hand traps. It hits Mermails. Just any effect in grave or in hand. So it works against, Bujins, Lightsworn Ruler, other artifacts, just so many things. So this card is really good. After that, I play 3 one-of counter traps, and this is where I'm a little undecided, but I play 1 copy of Wiretap. Originally, I was playing 2, but the thing is like, you already have a lot of back row removal in this deck, whether that be because of Ice Hand and stuff, or because of the Ignitions and Double Cyclones. So, like, I kind of didn't want to play this, but at the same time, there are several different traps that, can hurt your plays, but also shuffling back opponents' sanctums can be good, but I think only 1 is really necessary, and instead of playing 2, I chose to play 1 copy of Magic Drain, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying with Artemis. I really like this card, and I would almost consider dropping the Wiretap and siding the 2 Wiretaps, or, obviously I'm not playing MST, but I would side MSTs. What Magic Train does is, I made a whole video on this as well at one point, you're able to, when your opponent activates a spell card, your opponent has the option of discarding a spell to negate the effect of this card, meaning not the activation, but the effect. And if they don't discard a spell, that spell card that they had activated is negated and destroyed. So this is a card that I feel against a lot of faster decks or decks with crazy consistency, this becomes really good. So picture a scenario where you have Bountiful Artemis plus this, and your opponent is on, say, something like one of the Dragon Ruler decks, and they go for something like Trade-In. They activate Trade-In, they discard a Blue Eyes, for example. You activate this. Now your opponent either is going to lose that discard plus the Trade-In if they don't have another spell to discard, or they're going to have to discard an additional card just to get that extra card. And with Artemis, you're going to get a draw. So your opponent is going to go very minus on it. Or, for example, in the case of spellbooks, they go Blue Boy, add secrets, right? Activate secrets. They have to then get rid of another spell in order to resolve the secrets. And if that's the case, sometimes they might not then have enough spells in hand to go for a High Priestess, or they might not have extra spells to go for a Master play or something like that. So just a very, very solid card. There's so many other situations where this can come up. For example, in a top deck war, if your opponent finds a Soul Charge, you're able to stop the Soul Charge. Also, a lot of decks, a handful of them aren't on the most spell cards, so a lot of times this will just end up negating their spell. So really, really good card. Been liking this a lot. And the last counter trap I'm choosing to play is one copy of Blackhorn, just because things like H.A.T or even like 101 or Dweller or stuff can be very hurtful to this deck at times, so having a way just to get rid of the monster. But the biggest thing is just really these three of how many of each I'd want to play. After that, 2 copies of Call the Haunted. It's a way to get your Artemis back from grave. It's also a way to get back your artifacts to trigger them. There's even cases where I've brought back a Honest. I used Honest effect on my turn to bounce back, and then I'll use 2 artifacts to make a Pleiades and bounce this. So really, really cool card. And lastly, I play some one-ofs. I play 1 copy of Breakthrough Skill, 1 Bottomless, 1 Compulse, 1 Torrential, and 1 Warning. Again, there are a lot of traps, and I'm still working on the trap aspect of the deck of how many of each I really want to play. But overall, it's been pretty consistent. Even opening, 5 traps, it stalls you out long enough because of how high impact a lot of these are, and a lot of them get you into other things. For the extra deck, I play 1 copy of Gaia Dragon to stack on top of the rank 5s, 1 copy of Zenmayo because it's really big and also it helps pop set cards, 1 copy of Tiras to play through back row, 2 copies of Pleiades. I almost considered playing only 1, but there were a handful of games where I kind of wanted another. I don't like the idea of playing so many rank 5s when I'm only really playing 4 targets, but then with the Call the Haunteds, there's more things you can play. So realistically, you can almost cut this down, or even cut another one of these rank 5s because I do play even more. I'm also playing, obviously, the Volcasaurus for burn, and then, you need the Gaia Dragon for that. And I'm also playing the Durendal just because it's a really good card. Ideally, I would want to cut down on one of these. I'm not entirely sure, but like I said, maybe 1 Pleiades if need be, because I like just having variety. So that's what I chose for the 5s and the Gaia Dragon. For the 4s, I play 1 copy of Ragnazero. It has 2400 attack, so it's decently statted, but it's also a way to get an extra draw if your opponent is on something like Fire Fist or something. 1 copy of Black Ship of Corn to deal with opponents' hands and stuff. 1 101, 1 H.A.T, 1 copy of Bujin Tsukiyomi. Really, you can only make this with either Honest or your Artemis. And I found that if I am gonna have to use the Artemis for Nyxes, a lot of times it's in a really dire situation, so having to discard your hand and draw 2 new cards can be really nice. It also has 2300 defense, so that's not terrible either. After that, we play 1 copy of Emerald to put back, your artifacts or hands so that you can have your Ignitions and Sanctums live again, or just keep cycling through your hands. 1 copy of Dweller, obviously, and 1 copy of Rhapsody and Berserk, because I would rather side hand traps, so this is basically just like crows and stuff on your turn. In terms of the extra deck, I might want to try to find room for a Cowboy, or even maybe something like a Lavavel Chain, because there's some cool plays where you could dump an artifact and then Call the Haunted it, but realistically probably just a Cowboy if anything. But yeah, that is the deck. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like on this video, comment any questions or videos you'd like to see in the future, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to get notified anytime I put a new video out, and anyways guys, I will see you in the next video.